questions that matter to you, but also it's a chance to find out, more about the candidate, the stuff that you aren't hearing elsewhere. It gives us an opportunity to find out what they're like as a person, what they do in their free time, how they maybe come about making decisions. So we encourage you to all certainly be involved today. We'll look for questions from the audience at a number of different points. There is a hashtag. Those of you, I'm sure, have cell phones with you. It's Life of the Party NH. So Facebook, Twitter, be sure to tag both Stay Work Play and the Institute of Politics. Before we welcome the Senator, I'd like to have our other moderators introduce themselves. Chris?
My name is Chris Wellington, and I'm with the Grafton County Economic Development Council. We are a nonprofit economic development organization that assists small businesses with technical assistance and financing.
And my name is also Chris Williams. I live and work down in Nashua. I am a partner with a company called Velocity Performance. We specialize in executive and management training for companies across New Hampshire and New England. But I also get to moonlight here with Stay Work Play in a volunteer capacity to be engaged in activities related to keeping young people and young workers right here in the state. So I've spent many a day and an evening here on this campus, and I'm happy to be here again.
Awesome, and with that, we want to welcome Senator Cruz.
Woo!
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, Chris. Well, thank you for joining us very much. We're happy to have you here. This is a series that we have been doing now for a couple of months in this campaign cycle. This is brought to everyone here by a partnership between the Institute of Politics and Stay Work Play, but it's sponsored by Bank of America. So I want to really give them a special thank you here as we get started for being a part of this and making it possible. Senator, welcome to New Hampshire.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
I told you before you came out, I'm a fellow Texan. I've been up here for 15 years. I can testify New Hampshire is good to Texans, so we're glad to have you.
It is a beautiful state. The live free or die spirit is wonderful. I will confess it's a little cold here. And in fact, I'm going to make an admission. New Hampshire has beaten me. I typically wear every day of the week my cowboy boots, my ostrich cowboy boots, and yet I am embarrassed to say that New Hampshire has forced me to trade them in for snow boots. Let me apologize to all 27 million Texans that I lacked the courage of my convictions, but fortunately have not yet broken my back walking in the snow and ice.
As we go through this, I want to make sure everyone knows that we're happy to take questions from the audience. So at any time, don't feel like you have to wait for a certain part of the program. Put your hand up, and as each of us sees a hand go up, we'll be sure to call on you. So please keep that in mind. Don't feel like you have to wait for a certain point in the program. I do want to just ask you, though. I've been up here for 16 years from Texas myself. You're fairly new to New Hampshire. Here, I'd love to just get your impressions on how you think your campaign is going here specifically, rather than what do you think about New Hampshire? We know it's cold. How about your campaign? Because you've really sort of recently become more aggressive here in the state.
You know, I am really encouraged what we're seeing on the ground. We are running in New Hampshire a grassroots campaign, and it is the same approach we've taken all across the country, in the early primary states and nationally. The strength of the campaign is really the men and women on the ground. And one of the things that I appreciate the most about the state of New Hampshire is how seriously everyone in this state takes politics. Look, y'all treat politics like we treat football in Texas.
Yeah, this is our religion.
And it's a wonderful thing. The process of a grassroots campaign, when I ran for the Senate in Texas, we ran a grassroots campaign. Spent thousands of hours going to IHOPs and Denny's and just answering people's questions. And that's very much how we're approaching the campaign here in New Hampshire. We're in the middle of a bus tour, 15 stops across the state, traveling, have been to all 10 counties, and just doing town halls, doing house parties, going to VFW halls, and just answering the questions, giving the men and women of New Hampshire the opportunity to look you in the eyes, to ask the difficult question, and really to take a measure of who you are and what you believe. And I will say, one of the reasons I am a passionate advocate of New Hampshire's first in the nation status, for the reason that if we began presidential primaries in a big state, if we began in California or New York or Texas, it would be decided almost entirely by slick Hollywood TV ads. It would just be whoever could come up with the best air war would decide it. What's great about New Hampshire is that every one of you is performing a service to millions of Americans by taking the time to vet the candidates, to determine who is telling the truth and who isn't, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you for that. And you did hit the nail on the head. We take it very seriously, and we like to have our town hall meetings and the diner stops where you get some very serious questions.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll get some of that here today. But given our audience, and we're all relatively young ourselves, you might get a few sort of personal icebreaker type questions as well. So with that, I'm going to tee it up for Kate.
So are we bringing Trivial Pursuit out tonight?
No beer pong today, I promise.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue, because I did read that you do like games.
I do indeed.
So if you imagine you're president and you are inviting the top 40 young leaders from around the country to a party at the White House, we want to know what would that party look like. So might you play board games? What music would you play? We had some country music playing earlier. Rumor has it that you're a fan. But who would you invite, and what would you do, and what would the party look like? What would you eat?
Well, I can tell you one party that we're going to do. Actually, let me tell a story of when I got engaged to my wife, Heidi. Heidi grew up in California. Her family are all California vegetarians. And she invited me to come to their house for Christmas dinner, and her whole extended family was there, and all of them were vegetarians. And a vegetarian Christmas dinner is just like any other, but the entree never arrives. and so, her parents are trying to get to know this strange young man that their daughter has brought home, this Texan-Cuban Philistine. And so her mom asked me, says, well, what does your family do for Christmas? And I said, well, we're Cuban. And the Cuban tradition is on Christmas Eve, we typically roast a whole pig. You have never seen such looks of abject horror. If you could imagine a room full of California vegetarians, if I had said we consume live kittens under a full moon, they would not have been more upset. And so in terms of parties that I intend to have in the White House, mark your calendar now, December 24th, 2017, Christmas Eve, we are going to have a pig roast on the south lawn of the White House. And I got to say, the reporters may be a little terrified, saying the Cubans are coming, the Cubans are coming. But I'm going to get my dad out there, we're going to dig a pit, and we're going to roast up a pig for Christmas Eve.
Very nice. That's great. Well, I am curious to the board game piece. So you like board games? What sort
I
of
like
games do you
all
play?
games. I like card games, I like board games. Used to play a ton of Monopoly, particularly in college. My dad and I, when I was growing up, we'd play Monopoly. My mother would refuse to play with us because my dad and I would play cutthroat and bankrupt each other. Look, it's the closest I've ever been to being Donald Trump was playing Monopoly, and it would play a lot of that, play a lot of card games, play a lot of video games. Probably the thing that drives my wife Heidi crazy the most about me is playing video games on my iPhone. It just drives her nuts. But my daughters love it. So we sit there, our girls are 7 and 5, and we'll sit there and play Plants vs. Zombies or Candy Crush. And it's that is a wonderful thing. So I could see playing an awful lot of games. You're hard-pressed to find a game that I wouldn't enjoy playing.
Okay.
Well, I have to say, you took two of my questions right from me. One was the Plant vs. Zombies and video games, and the other was asking about the importance of the New Hampshire primary and the role that it plays. So thank you for that.
Well, after that, what else is there to talk about?
Exactly, yeah. So I guess my question is, if you were to have a party and you could bring 3 people to it, living or dead, who would you choose and why?
Maybe let's take out politicians.
No politicians.
No politicians.
Yeah.
Let's have a fun party, so no politicians.
That's almost by definition. Well, I mean, look, one answer, if you could sit down with anyone, having the opportunity to sit down with Jesus Christ, sitting at a dinner table would be an amazing experience. But let's set that aside because that's sort of separate and apart from that kind of question. I will say in my office in the Senate, I have 3 busts. And the 3 busts that are in that office, I'm going to fail your test of no politicians, are Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, and Martin Luther King. And I think that would be at a pretty amazing dinner party to sit down with the 3 of them. The reason they're in my office is all 3 of them were men of principle. They knew what they believed. They stood up and spoke the truth. And they did so at times of enormous challenge, and they paid a personal price. 2 of the 3 suffered assassin's bullets for it. And so those are certainly 3 people that I admire greatly. You know, last year I wrote a book called A Time for Truth. And each chapter begins with profiling a truth teller. Profiling someone who I admire, who at a time of great challenge stood up and told the truth and paid a consequence. And I think it would be tough to improve on that, but if you went more pop culture, it wouldn't be bad to include Elvis in that. That would make for an interesting. I'd love to sit down with the King.
Okay, you got me with pop culture because one of the things that I love about you, Senator Cruz, is in reading a lot about what you talk about in popular culture is we have a mutual love for Star Wars.
Excellent.
And it's not just a mutual love for Star Wars. Your references to Star Wars show that you're not just some politician who's like, you know, I'm just making a reference because the movie just came out.
Yep.
You literally said Han shot first. That is a Star Wars fanboy reference. So I actually have if it's okay, I have a lightsaber for you.
Okay, this is very, very cool. The last time I was in this room, I got to sign wooden eggs, and today I'm getting a lightsaber.
But I have a question. It's related to Star Wars, and you, thank you, by the way. May the Force be with you. So, as a senator, you're in a Senate. Star Wars has a Senate, and we know that there's, you know, I know that you would be admiring Senator Leia Organa over Senator Palpatine.
Yeah. Indeed.
Both senators of conviction, but you know, one on the good side, fighting the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think that we love, why we love Star Wars so much, is that it's a retelling of the American Revolution.
Sure.
You know, scrappy underdog rebels that are fighting a pre-existing empire.
Yes.
And destroying a Death Star, which Senator Leia has to watch destroy her planet. Now, over 80% of the American people, 80% of Americans, 80% of Republicans, 83% of Democrats, essentially believe that 6 years ago, to this day, a Death Star was created in the form of Citizens United, which is aimed at our democracy of by and for the people. And I've put out something, you can check it out at JediPledge.org. We really want you to sign this Jedi Pledge as a Star Wars fanboy, begging you to sign this Jedi Pledge and stand with we the people and the Force so that you can stand with your fellow Republicans, with your fellow Democrats, with your fellow Americans and humans so that we can target that Death Star that is Citizens United and even go further so that we can all have a voice. Not money, but us, we the people. And I'm asking you, would you sign a pledge to undo the damage that Citizens United and big money, the empire of big money, is doing? Or are you going to switch over to the Palpatine side and give me some kind of Sith Lord mind trick about disclosure and not go further than that?
Right.
I want to see the conviction.
Thank you for the question and the lightsaber.
Well, I will say that may win the prize for the most unique question I've gotten on the campaign. And I will confess, you're right. When it comes to talking about things like Star Wars or Star Trek or comic books, I am not reading talking points on that. You know, one of my favorite interviews I've done, I think, in the whole campaign is I did about a half hour with Geek Talk Radio, talking all about comic books and Star Wars. And by the way, I think Han Solo is the coolest character in all of cinema. And anyone who says they think Luke Skywalker is, I think, should be disqualified from the presidential election. That's just the wrong answer in that question. Look, on the substantive question you raised, I disagree with where you are. And here's the reason why. I believe in free speech. You know, if you actually look, using the frame you used of the empire as government power and the rebels fighting to empower the people, campaign finance reform is one of the most misunderstood issues in all of politics because it gets put in terms of protecting the people, protecting the little guy. But if you notice, all these campaign finance laws are passed by incumbent politicians. And their object is to protect incumbent politicians. There are three avenues of speech in politics: the media, incumbent politicians, and then the people. What you see Washington doing with campaign finance reform is trying to silence the people. I am a passionate believer in free speech and the First Amendment. And let me point out, so in 2014, there's a long section in my book that talks about the effort the Democrats had in 2014 to respond to Citizens United. And Citizens United, they responded by introducing a constitutional amendment that would have effectively repealed the free speech provisions of the First Amendment.
But how about public finance? 158 families are funding over 50% of this presidential race. So how can you say that you're speaking for the little guy? You're speaking for about 200 people. Those aren't little guys.
So let me answer that, although we're not going to engage in a debate. I'll answer your question, but we're not going to go back and forth. I can answer, at least in terms of our campaign, that we have received over 700,000 contributions from over 2/3 of the zip codes in America. Our average contribution is $67. So you're right, there's a bunch of big money in this race. The Washington establishment right now, they're abandoning Marco Rubio, and they're rushing to Donald Trump. So that's where the big money is. That's where the corporate lobbyists are. That's where the Wall Street interests are. And our campaign is fueled by over 700,000 contributions nationwide. But what happened, so the Democrats in 2014, in response to Citizens United, the amendment they proposed, the First Amendment they proposed, would have given Congress plenary authority, blanket authority, to regulate and prohibit any expenditure of money to influence an election. It would have given Congress the power, literally, to fine a little old lady if she spends $5 on erecting a yard sign in her front yard. It's a massive power grab by Congress. I led the fight against it. Then the Democrats backed away from that. They went to a second version. Their amendment said Congress would have the power to prohibit any corporation from speaking about speech in any way, shape, or speaking about politics. And we had a whole series of hearings. For someone that is interested in this, I would encourage you to watch the hearings we had in the Senate Judiciary Committee, where I led the opposition to this. And I asked three simple questions. Dick Durbin, the Democrat from Illinois, was proposing amending the First Amendment to take away our free speech protections. And I asked him three questions. I said, should Congress be able to ban movies? Number one. Should Congress be able to ban books? Number two. And should Congress be able to ban the NAACP from speaking about politics? Now, the first time I asked this was in the Constitution Subcommittee. Durbin literally gavelled the hearing down and ran out of the room. He didn't have an answer then. But then he came back in a full committee. I asked him again, and I said, let's start with movies. So Citizens United, does anyone here know actually the facts behind Citizens United? Citizens United is a nonprofit organization that made a movie critical of Hillary Clinton. And the Obama administration tried to fine them for daring to make a movie criticizing a politician. So the case that Democrats lambast is terrible. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't silence citizens speaking. You're entitled to criticize politicians. I pointed out, listen, Paramount Pictures is a corporation. What does the constitutional amendment you're proposing say? It says Congress for corporations can prohibit, that was the word they used, prohibit, any and all political speech.
You're not signing the Jedi flag.
No, I'm not, but hold on, let me finish running through this quickly. On books, should Congress be able to prohibit books? You know, during the Citizens United oral argument, the Supreme Court asked the Obama Justice Department, under your argument, could you punish someone for writing a book that criticized a politician? And their answer was yes. Yes, we can go after book publishers. Listen, I've dubbed these guys the Fahrenheit 451 Democrats. What kind of world are we when you got politicians punishing people for writing books? And finally, the NAACP is a corporation. Under the terms of the Democrats' amendment, what could Congress do? Prohibit the NAACP from speaking about politics. Congress could prohibit the NRA or Planned Parenthood or the ACLU or the Sierra Club. Every one of those is a corporation. And, you know, 20 years ago, a group of Democrats tried to pass very much the same sort of thing, giving Congress the power to muzzle citizen speech. And there were a handful of brave liberals, people like Ted Kennedy, who stood up against it and said, we have not amended the Bill of Rights in over 200 years, now is no time to start. And I'm sorry to tell you that when it came time for a vote, every single Democrat in Congress stood by repealing the free speech protections of the First Amendment. I think the best cure for bad speech is more speech, and I will always fight. Look, when it comes to movies, Michael Moore's movies, I think are idiotic. But he's got a First Amendment right to keep making idiotic movies and attacking whoever he likes. I get attacks right now from almost every candidate in the field. And I don't intend to ask government to muzzle my opponents. I believe in the American people and democracy, and the more you silence the citizens, the more the empire and the Death Star and the power of government gets stronger because you're silencing citizens.
I'm going to pivot us over to an issue that might be on the minds of some of the younger folks in the room, myself included. For the past, say, 10 to 12 years or so, the Republican Party has really had an internal debate about how it's building a bridge to the next generation of American community leadership. Yep. Where do you see that debate today? How do you see yourself, should you be the next president, being the face of the Republican Party and building that bridge to a lot of us in this room?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things that is encouraging about our campaign is that we're seeing tremendous enthusiasm among young people. We've got really an army of young people who are supporting the campaign. We've got an army of millennials and young professionals and even teenagers who can't vote but are going out knocking on doors and asking other people to come vote. And, you know, I think the key, you know, in both 2008 and 2012, Obama got about 70% of young people's vote. But it's interesting, following 2012, President Obama's popularity has plummeted with young people. And part of the reason is the consequences of the Obama agenda have really come home to roost. I think the way Republicans earn the support of young people, and even though Obama has dropped, young people haven't decided Republicans are the way to go. They're simply demoralized and dispirited by what they're seeing. I think the answer, there's both substance and style. On substance, I'll say this. If you were to sit down and try to design an agenda to hammer the living daylights out of young people, it would be very difficult to come up with a more effective agenda than the Obama economic agenda. And let me point to three factors. Number one, for young people coming out of school right now, for 7 years we've been trapped in the Obama stagnation. Young people coming out of school, student loans, afraid, am I going to get a job? The future and opportunity for young people when you have stagnant economic growth, 1-2% economic growth, is sapping the future for this generation. Number two, Obamacare. One of the easiest ways to understand Obamacare, it is a massive wealth transfer from young, healthy people to everybody else. It's one of the reasons Obama's popularity plummeted, because once Obamacare went into effect, young people suddenly saw their premiums skyrocket. And then number three, the national debt. In 7 years, it's gone from $10 trillion to over $18 trillion. Who the heck do you think is paying for that? If we don't stop this, the young people in this room, y'all will spend your whole lives not working to meet the priorities of the future, but simply working to pay off the debts from your deadbeat parents and grandparents. That is wrong and immoral. I think on substance, an agenda of freedom, of protecting the Bill of Rights, of protecting free speech, of protecting the individual liberty, of bold economic growth is very appealing to young people. But then style matters. Listen, nobody is going to vote for someone that seems like, that is so uptight. I mean, would it kill Republicans to crack a joke? You know, have some fun. You know, online we put out a meme. Reaganomics. You start a business in your parents' garage. Obamanomics. You move into your parents' garage. And, you know, people laughed, they liked it, they forwarded it, they shared it. You know, some of it is you've got to have some fun. I'll give you one other quick example. Some time ago, I traveled out to California. And when I was out there, these posters began appearing all over town. And they were posters of my head on a shirtless body. And the body was ripped. It was covered in tattoos. There's a giant eagle on my chest. Had 2 6-shooters on my abs, which were a perfect 8-pack. Had Winston Churchill on my right bicep, which was massive, had a cigarette dangling out of my mouth. And above it, the legend, blacklisted and loving it. Now look, we had nothing to do with these posters. This was not our idea. It was a local street artist who did them on his own. But we decided to have some fun with them. So we posted on Facebook a story about that and said, for whatever reason, these posters have begun appearing all over Hollywood. I got to say, I noticed a glaring error. I don't smoke cigarettes. That's part of how you connect with young people, is you have fun and you have a message that resonates. I think that's what we need to do, and it's certainly what we're trying to do in our campaign.
All right, so with that, tell us, I mean, you've done a lot of things, and outside of becoming president, what's still on your bucket list? What sort of fun things are you hoping to still accomplish?
What sort of fun things am I hoping to still accomplish? Look, I've always wished I could slam dunk a basketball. That ain't never going to happen. Sadly, I have a miserable vertical jump. You know, I played basketball in high school, and I was small, but I was slow. So my dreams of an NBA career were not going to materialize. You know, when I was in high school, there was a period of time when I wanted to drop out of school and move to Hollywood and be an actor. And I quickly realized I didn't have the talent to make it. That wasn't going to work. That was not my calling. My parents were not fond of this whole dropping out of school thing. That was not high on their list. So those are things I wanted to do, neither one of which I think I ever will. You know, in terms of where my time and energy is spent, I mean, right now, every waking moment is on the campaign trail. And the other major focus of my life is being a husband and dad. I mean, I will say it really does. You know, when people ask, what do you like to do for fun? Listen, when I was a single guy, you know, I mean, I'd host poker parties at the house. We would play games, you know, go out and play pool or play foosball. I've played more than a game or two of beer pong, I will confess to that. But it's interesting, as you reach a different stage in life when you're a dad, you know, what do I do in my free time? We go to the park. We go swimming in the pool. We, you know, teach the girls to ride a bike. I mean, that is almost all of our free time now is doing something with the girls. They're 7 and 5.
Yep.
And it's the single hardest thing of the campaign. Caroline and Catherine pay a price. You know, I'm on the road here. Heidi's on the road in Iowa right now. The girls are going more and more on the road with us. We're trying to homeschool them some on the road so they can be with us. But it's tough. So 2 days ago, Heidi and Caroline and Catherine were down in South Carolina. And Catherine's our 5-year-old, and she's braver than Caroline. They have, you know, all kids have different personalities, but the 5-year-old Catherine, Heidi sent me a text. She said, OMG, Catherine is the funniest thing I've ever seen. She's walking up to doors at 5, knocking on the door, saying, hello, are you going to vote on February 20th? Would you consider voting for my daddy? And I talked to Catherine yesterday morning on the way to school, and she was so excited. She said she had gotten 20 votes for daddy. And Caroline, the older one who's 7, she would kind of hang back and see what they said to Catherine. So if they said yes, then Caroline would pop in, yeah, you need to vote for my dad. But if they said no, Caroline's view was, listen, if they're not our friends, we need to get off their property. So they have kind of a different take. But in terms of fun, right now, fun and what we do is play with the girls more than anything.
Yeah.
Why don't we turn, I want to make sure I get a question from back here. This is my back. Yes, sir. Yep.
So my name's Brian Pickowitz.
Hey, Brian.
Here at St. A's. I just want to thank you for coming out. One of the things I've seen with the election is, especially with Trump and everything of the like, there's been a lot of talk about ISIS, which is a really important issue.
Yes.
But also healthcare and things like the economy have taken a back seat.
Right.
So other than talking about repealing Obamacare, what can you actually give the voters out here of substance that will talk about how they can improve healthcare?
Yeah. So Brian, very good question. Let me take it in 2 parts. So the question for anyone who couldn't hear is what should we do on healthcare, if I can sum that up quickly. And let me take it in 2 pieces. You know, 6-7 years ago, when Obamacare was being debated, reasonable minds, I think, maybe could have differed on whether this might work. Now, 6 years into it, millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have been forced into part-time work. have lost their health insurance, have lost their doctors, and have seen their premiums skyrocket. New Hampshire in particular, premiums have gone through the roof. I'll tell you, you know who one of those millions of Americans is who's lost their health care because of Obamacare? That would be me. I don't have health care right now. I had purchased an individual policy, and Blue Cross Blue Shield canceled all their individual policies in the state of Texas effective December 31st. So our health care got canceled. We got a notice in the mail. Blue Cross Blue Shield was leaving the market. And so we're in the process of finding another policy. I hope by the end of the month we'll have a policy for our family. But our premiums, we just got a quote, our premiums are going up 50%. That's happening all over the country. That's happening in New Hampshire. By the way, when you let your health insurance policy lapse, your wife gets really ticked at you. It's not a good, I've had, shall we say, some intense conversations with Heidi on that. I think now, seeing all the suffering that Obamacare has caused, I think it is the essence of reasonableness and moderation and pragmatism to say this thing isn't working, we need to repeal it and start over. So step one, I believe, and if I'm elected president, this is what will happen, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. Now once we do that, we're not done. Everyone agrees you need health care reform. But I think health care reform should begin with some broad principles. It should begin by expanding competition in the marketplace. It should empower patients and consumers to make health care decisions in consultation with their doctors. And it should disempower government from getting in between us and our doctors. Now let me give you three specific proposals that reflect those principles. Number one, we should allow people to purchase health insurance across state lines. That's right now illegal, and I'll tell you, that's a particularly damaging law for the state of New Hampshire. It's a relatively small state. It's illegal for residents of New Hampshire to buy health insurance in any of the other 49 states. If we allow that to happen, what we do is we create a true 50-state national marketplace. That competition will drive down cost and expand the availability of low-cost catastrophic health care. If you want more access, and listen, everyone here wants more people to have access to health care. If you want more access, the biggest barrier to access is cost. If you ask people, why don't you have health insurance? They say, I can't afford it. If you want more access, what you want is more choices and lower costs. What does Obamacare do? Fewer choices and higher costs. So that's step one, open up a national marketplace. Step two is expand health savings accounts so that people can save in a tax-advantaged manner for more routine health care, for things like prevention and routine health care needs. But step number three is we need to work to de-link health insurance from employment. You know, a lot of people don't know the history of why it is that most people get their health insurance from their jobs. It actually arose coming out of World War II, where there were wage and price controls in effect. And so employers, trying to attract new employees, they couldn't offer higher wages. So they began offering perks, additional benefits, things like health insurance. It was a way to attract new employees. And the tax laws incentivized that. But the problem is today, we don't live in the 1950s anymore. Very few people in this room are going to go work for one big company for 40 years and then retire and get a gold watch. We live in a mobile, transitory society where most of us will go from company to company, from industry to industry, sometimes from city and state to city and state. And right now, if you lose your job, you don't lose your car insurance. You don't lose your house insurance or your life insurance. There's no reason on earth you should lose your health insurance. And of all of them, it's the worst one to lose, because that causes much of the problem of pre-existing conditions where someone loses their job, they lose their health insurance policy, and then they can't get a new one because they've gotten sick or injured. So I think health care reform should make health insurance personal and portable and affordable. And I think that's a much more attractive vision than a Washington-dictated, one-size-fits-all Obamacare that people are hurting from across the country.
Thanks for the question, Brian. I wanted to ask another question that I think might pertain to a lot of folks in this room here, and that's college debt. You know, Chris and I were talking backstage a little bit about this. This is a huge issue.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still paying on my loans, actually, as well, and I'm certain there's a number of folks in this room who are going to be paying on their loans. How do we tackle this issue?
Oh, look, it's a very important question, and this is a question that I understand firsthand. When I was in high school, my parents went bankrupt. And so I found myself at age 17 financially independent. Involuntarily, I might add. And so when I went off to college, I had 2 jobs to help pay my way through school, to help make ends meet. And between college and grad school, I ended up taking out about $100,000 in school loans. And so I came out of college with a mortgage, but no house. And you said you're still paying on your loans. I paid off my loans finally about 6 years ago. So I get firsthand what it's like to come out with a crushing student loan debt. You know, I think we need to do a couple of things. One of the things we need to do, the Obama administration nationalized the student loan industry. Drove the private lenders out of business and drew it all into Washington and made it a government program. I think we need to put it back in the private sector. We need to have lenders competing again. I think that will benefit students and borrowers. But secondly, the biggest challenge for young people is coming out of school. When you've got massive student loan, young people are scared, am I going to get a job? If I do get a job, will it be a job where I'm learning skills, where I can work towards a career, where I have a future, where I'll be able to provide for my family? And as long as we stay in the Obama stagnation, 1% and 2% economic growth, young people's future is not bright. The way to change that, if you look historically, the 2 greatest levers for economic growth are tax reform and regulatory reform. Every time in the past we've reduced the burdens of taxes and regulations on small businesses, we've seen unbelievable economic growth. We saw it in the 1920s when Calvin Coolidge did it. We saw it in the 1960s when JFK did it. We saw it in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan did it. And that's why I'm running the 2 major legislative initiatives that I'm running on are repealing Obamacare and passing a simple flat tax where every American can fill out their taxes on a postcard, and we abolish the IRS. Now those 2 reforms, if we get them passed, will unleash unbelievable economic growth. 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. And the difference it'll make for young people is young people will be coming out of school with 3, 4, 5 job opportunities, with options, with a brighter future, with a future ahead where they can pay their loans. I mean, what makes the loans so much like quicksand is when you've got the loans and the payments, but you don't have a job and an income to pay them. And the way to change that, you know, a lot of young people have been sold a bill of goods that this is a new normal. This is just the way America is. That's baloney. For most of the history of this country, we have had incredible, robust economic growth. Economic growth, historically since World War II, has been 3.3% a year. And yet from 2008 to today, it's been only 1.2% a year. The best thing we can do for young people is change the economic environment with small businesses growing, so when you come out of school, you have jobs and a bright future.
Thank you for that. And I think we're at a point here. I know we've got to get you on your schedule for the rest of the day. So I'll ask Kate for one final question here.
And actually, this young lady here has been trying very hard to ask a question.
Okay.
So let's give her a shot.
Well, thank you. And you've talked a lot about the economy and how that's impacted young people.
Yeah.
As a Gen Xer, I asked this, and thinking about like Social Security solvency.
Yep.
And
Yep.
its solvency in 2034, which is right now, troubled.
Yes.
What would you do to update Social Security for those of us who
Yeah.
haven't been able to save, and how would you work with Congress?
Right. So that is a very, very important question. I think what right now politicians in Washington are doing with Social Security, I think it is reckless and irresponsible. Social Security has been a fundamental bulwark of our society. And politicians in Washington are allowing it to careen towards insolvency and bankruptcy. As president, I will lead to strengthen and preserve Social Security. And let me tell you specifically how. For a long time, Social Security has been the third rail of politics. You touch it, you get electrocuted. Well, we need leaders who have the courage of their convictions to actually solve problems instead of just blowing hot air. Here are the principles that we should follow with Social Security reform. First of all, for seniors, for anyone on Social Security or near retirement, there should be no changes whatsoever, zero. We have made promises. People have ordered their financial affairs. They've counted on those promises. We need to honor those promises. But for younger workers, you mentioned you're a Gen Xer, so am I. I'm 45. It is hard to find someone, our generation, that thinks Social Security will be there for us. And even more so among younger generations. That presents an amazing opportunity for reform. When you've got the vast majority of younger workers understanding that what we're doing now is unsustainable, for younger workers we need to do 3 reforms. Number 1, gradually increase the retirement age. People are living much, much longer, and give younger workers time to plan on it, to anticipate on it. Number 2, we need to change the rate of growth in Social Security benefits for younger workers so that they match inflation instead of exceeding inflation. Now, those 2 changes, implementing those, bring Social Security into solvency. But the third piece that I think is critical is we need to allow younger workers to keep a portion of our tax savings, tax payments, in a personal account that we own, that we control, and that we can pass on to our kids and grandkids. And I'll point out, when it comes to Social Security personal accounts, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the late Democratic senator from New York, he used to talk about Social Security personal accounts as the final culmination of FDR's New Deal. It's an estate not just for every millionaire, but for every bellman answering the door. It is about empowering young people and enabling, if you look right now, let's take right now an African-American man who's working as a janitor, or an Hispanic woman in my home state of Texas who's cleaning houses. The status quo right now is they'll work 30, 40 years. They'll work their fingers to the bone. They'll pay into the system year after year after year. They retire, they get a few years of payments, and then they pass away. That's what happens right now. With personal accounts, those same workers, relatively low-income workers, paying into the system, can work through those years, pay into the system. When they retire, they receive their Social Security, but even at really modest levels of income, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Over the course of a full career working, that janitor, that maid can have saved up and earned in a personal account $100,000, $150,000, $200,000. That is game-changing. That gives that individual resources that they can use and they can pass on to their kids or grandkids to put a down payment on a house, to start a business, to get an education. My focus in politics is what I call opportunity conservatism, which is that every policy we think about should focus like a laser on easing the means of ascent up the economic ladder, on asking how does it impact the most vulnerable among us, young people, Hispanics, African Americans, single moms, and enabling people, empowering people to save and accumulate assets that are theirs for their family helps them climb the economic ladder. Look, I know this firsthand because 58 years ago my dad came from Cuba. And he was 18 years old. He couldn't speak English. He had $100 in his underwear. And he washed dishes making 50 cents an hour. And it was the incredible American free enterprise system that lets a teenage kid who doesn't speak the language be able to work forward, start a small business, and work towards the American dream. We need to have policies that enable and make it easier for people all across the country to do the same thing. And I think with Social Security reform, with real leadership, we can get this done. And that's what I'm committed to doing as president.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for the additional question, taking the time to do that. Kate, I'll turn it over to you for one final.
So today's theme was Life of the Party, your chance to connect with the young folks in the room here. So what would you give as your toast to this audience on the journey ahead for you, what things we should all be thinking about?
I'm reminded of, have any of y'all seen the movie Braveheart? Okay, so Senator Mike Lee, my closest friend in the Senate, senator from Utah, fantastic guy, smart, principled. He and I text back and forth all the time. There is this wonderful app on the iPhone called Dub Smash. Have you guys seen it? Where it's actually, I'm going to be a free ad for it, but you can take movie lines and you can record video to whatever movie line or song lyric you have, and it's a fun thing to email your friends. So anyway, some time ago, Mike sends me a text of the scene at the end of Braveheart, where Mel Gibson, when he's dying, yells at the top of his lungs, "Freedom!" And it's actually Mike doing this with really an extended period. It was bloody hysterical. And I will confess, I then promptly went on Dub Smash and sent him back. And the one I did was from my favorite movie, The Princess Bride.
Great movie.
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepared to die. So that was the best. So if I were to give a toast, what this election is about, my toast would be to freedom. Or since we're in the state of New Hampshire, I guess I'll suck up a little bit and just say live free or die.
Senator, as much as I appreciate it, what you gave was a refusal to be with the Jedi. It was a palpable.
All right, so I'm going to cut us off right now because we do have to move on here.
Climate change matters, religious liberty
Thank you.
matters.
We can have a further
Thank
debate
you,
on
sir.
that. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone else for coming here as well today. Thank you for taking the time to do so. Senator, most importantly, thank you for taking some time out of your campaign.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thank you much, Senator.